Hi, I'm Cynthia Carvajal, Interim Director of Immigrant Student Success at CUNY. Welcome to this special I Am a Dreamer episode, Beyond DACA. I Am a Dreamer is a show that portrays the undocumented community in New York. But today, we're doing something a little different. We're having a conversation about deferred action for childhood arrivals, known as DACA. This executive action provides relief to eligible immigrants. It was created in 2012 during President Obama's term as a result of immigrant activism. In 2017, the Trump administration wanted to cancel DACA. Since then, a political and legal battle for its survival has intensified. Most recently, a judge in Texas overruled the Biden administration's efforts around DACA. We want to have this important conversation in two parts. First, we will discuss the status and impact of DACA. Secondly, what CUNY is doing or what else we can do to support undocumented students. There's a lot to parse here. Joining me today to make sense of it all and to understand the human perspective are Alan Warnick, lawyer and former director of CUNY Citizenship Now, Eva Santos, United We Dream's distributed organizer and spokesperson, Maria Fernanda Vera, New York State Youth Leadership Council community organizer, and DOE and CUNY Immigrant Ambassador, Mahir Sadad. And of course, in the audience, we have CUNY and SUNY community members. Welcome, everyone. Alan, I want you to get the conversation started. Can you tell us a little bit about DACA and the legal technicalities that led to it being declared unlawful?
Well, as you pointed out, Cynthia, first, thank you for having me on this panel. It's so important. As you pointed out, DACA was based on an executive order from President Obama, and as you pointed out correctly, it was the result of a tremendous amount of political pressure, sit-ins at his campaign offices. What happened was that executive order was challenged, and a federal court judge in Texas found that the program was unlawful on two bases. One, that Obama had not gone through the appropriate regulatory process. In other words, he just issued an executive order. More typically for a new procedure like this, and the court found that Obama should have gone through a more lengthy regulatory process, which would have required commentary from the public. And the judge also found that this was such a broad program that it was inconsistent with the generally understood to be constitutional point of view that only Congress can make our immigration laws. The authority for our immigration policy and laws rests with Congress, and that this, by granting so many people some form of legal status, allowing them to stay in the United States, work, and travel outside, was beyond what the executive branch had to do. The judge, so that's what the judge found it to be unlawful, but he, interestingly, because so many people had depended on DACA and had been in DACA status, those who had DACA were allowed to stay in that status and seek renewals and continue to travel abroad and to work lawfully in the United States, but no new applications were allowed. So where we are now is that the Biden administration did issue a regulation, went through the complete regulatory process. It's very detailed. It explains in length why DACA is an important program, why it should be supported. So the argument about there not having gone through a regulatory process is no longer a strong argument. So the Court of Appeals sent the case back to the Texas court judge so the judge could consider that regulation. The problem is, and the reason why we're not 100% optimistic about how that judge is going to rule, is that there's still the argument about whether or not the executive branch has the authority to promulgate a program that is so broad that affects so many people and provides a legal status that Congress has not authorized. So the judge has to consider that, and I think that most people observing the court believe that what's likely to happen is that the judge will rule the way he ruled before, allowing people who have DACA to stay in that status, but finding that the program overall is unlawful, and then we'll see what the circuit courts and eventually the Supreme Court will have to say. And I would point out it's likely to be a very lengthy process. I don't expect a final resolution of this issue anytime soon.
And this has been going on for several years.
It has been going on for several years. And unfortunately, you know, there are the people who you had to, as you know, you had to have been 50, at least age 15 to apply for DACA, and so many people have turned 50 who would have qualified have turned 15 since the judge's decision. So we're really in a position where we have a lot of people who would otherwise be qualified for DACA who are not able to apply under the current judge's decision.
Right. I know part of the conversation that folks are having is the result of this back and forth legislation. This political turmoil has resulted in a high level of anxiety and uncertainty for our students. Eva, I wanted to ask you if you could speak a little bit about maybe not just yours, but other community members' political involvement, community organizing efforts, and how that has helped in the process of processing all this turmoil in political context.
Well, I think my community is what has helped me overall. With this Band-Aid solution that DACA has been for us. I think everyone knows, like, I started volunteering about a year ago, and that's when I found, like, what was actually happening, because there's not really, they don't really say what is really going on. It's a lot of, like, technical terms that our community don't understand. So, therefore, we have been, like, mobilizing, like, young people, taking over the streets. Last year, I rallied in Brooklyn Bridge. We went to the White House. We did civil disobedience, just to show that, like, you know, citizenship was something important. Like, they had all the tools to a pathway to citizenship last year, and they failed to do that. And I believe, like, us coming in community here today and just continuing to do that has shaped and built this big moment that it's not gonna end here, regardless, even though that DACA is dying, and that is the thing that we have to know and be aware about. We're gonna continue to come together and demand that we deserve something better. Like, it's been far too long. Like, prior to me being involved in the community, I only have my family, because we live in a city already that we don't get a lot of resources and help. And it's been extremely hard to find that, mostly when DACA is not enough. Like, we know that DACA has been just something temporary and living us at the grasp of deportation. It can be taken away at any time. Just look at this. Right now, we are fearing, we don't know what's gonna happen. And like he said, like, this is gonna probably last another year. And so we should live like this. We should continue to live like this? Not at all. And I feel like we need to do more. As a community, we should, like, continue to voice out the importance of having something permanent. There were so many young people left out of DACA, and so many people that are gonna be left without a job, without so many, like, their whole lives for 10 years has depended on DACA. And unfortunately, it's dying, and therefore we must continue to come together. That's why I'm always in the streets, always trying to, like, teach everybody around me, because I think the community is what, like, built us to be able to change this, because we only have each other at this moment.
Mm-hmm. And I think you make a key point of, like, what the value is and the role is of community in creating those support systems. I do want to make sure, just because how do we hold our institutions accountable? How are our institutions involved in supporting this population? I want to direct this question then to Maria, who does also community organizing work and work with the universities and the campuses. And so I wonder, what do you think is something that political pundits and even universities forget in an attempt to support undocumented and DACA recipients while they're navigating this sense of uncertainty?
Yeah, well, I think everything that Eva said is great, right? But I feel like sometimes the universities or even community organizations forget about a certain population within the DACA population, right? So when we talk about people who were not eligible or not able to apply anymore, we're talking about, like, young people, but we also have, like, parents who are DACA recipients, people, like, older than, like, college age students, right? They have lives, they have, like, already established families here. So I think that population is oftentimes forgotten within the school as well, right? Because a lot of the resources will go to the young people, or the conversation starts sometimes in, like, high school, but then they're also not eligible to apply. So then they just, like, get pushed out into the world of, like, well, I don't know, like, DACA is your only option. So I think the politicized term of, like, dreamer also like, excludes a lot of people, right? Because even within the community, people don't call themselves dreamers anymore, because that is only a certain population. Somebody that, like, You know, if they're not, like, if they didn't graduate from college but they have DACA, then does that not make them a dreamer? You know, so I think it's our responsibility also to push back on our own peoples, but also on the schools and on the campuses to provide us with the resources that people need and not what they think you need.
And I think what I was also hearing is kind of an alluding to that within the DACA conversation, we don't include certain populations, particularly those who are not currently eligible for DACA, who have aged out of DACA, who would have been eligible at some stage. And that is really the goal of this conversation, thinking about beyond DACA. Mahir, I would love to hear your insight on what are some of the strategies in order to fully encapsulate students or individuals who are not eligible for DACA, won't be eligible for DACA at its current stage, and why is this important in this conversation?
I think first, Dr. Carvajal, I'll start with why this conversation is important. Something that CUNY has to recognize is that the undocumented struggle, the struggle with one's immigration status and legal status, it's just not a 4-year struggle. It's not going to end as soon as they graduate. It's something for many people who, for certain reasons, such as not being able to get legal help, it'll be being undocumented and the struggle of not having status in this country is something that's going to follow them for the rest of their lives. So connecting with what Ava said earlier, CUNY has to start understanding how to support, and also to what you were saying, Maria, earlier, CUNY has to start understanding how to support students beyond college. So for example, what do post-secondary opportunities or post-tertiary opportunities look like for CUNY students when they graduate? In another example, right now, just 2 campuses, Brooklyn and John Jay, have complete immigrant student success centers that help students with their needs. But then my home campus, Queens College, we just have a newsletter right now with resources for immigrants. That is something, but we continue to see that there isn't robust support campus-wide across all of at least the 8 senior colleges. And I personally don't understand why CUNY is not able to implement some sort of a bigger, more uniform structure. We already have something that works in the form of Macaulay Honors College. The way Macaulay is built, students are able to connect across campuses and also within communities within their own campuses. So CUNY already has successful structures that they can use to begin connecting students to the resources that they need. And then that brings me to what I was saying earlier about having more opportunities for students after they graduate. What you were mentioning, Maria, earlier, what happens when these undocumented students, when they graduate, when their 4-year program is over? Are we just going to let them struggle and suffer? Or what about students who, for example, may not be able to get internships and employment opportunities because of their status? I know that me being a political science major, I was lucky. I had a very supportive environment at my at the political science department at QC, and they were able to connect me to employment opportunities. But I cannot say the same for undocumented students that may have majored in accounting, finance, computer science. These technical fields require a lot of experiential learning, but because CUNY doesn't have some sort of structure to support them, they're not able to access those opportunities. So what are we saying to our students? Are we giving our undocumented students enough resources for them to thrive outside when they're finally outside the community of CUNY?
Mm-hmm. I want to continue that conversation on internship opportunities, experiential learning opportunities, because I know it is something that the university is interested in highlighting and upholding. Mm-hmm. And so I want to open kind of the next question to folks in this space. I think you all have described it, right? You're involved in community activism, you're involved in student programming, experiential learning. This work has historically fallen on student shoulders. What does it look like for a university to kind of take on some of that labor? So I wondered if folks here had any ideas on like what that strategy may look like, even like just kind of the beginning thoughts of it, because we also don't expect you all to come up with the plan, right?
Well, I think I was actually thinking about this earlier from my own experiences when I was at BMCC, right? And at the time, I was never eligible for DACA. I never had DACA. And at the time, I had applied to the peer mentoring program. And it was a rigorous like application process. You had to go through like 2 sets of interviews, sending like video applications and like written applications. And at every step, I kept telling them, I don't have a work permit. I don't have a work permit. And they were like, it's fine, we'll figure it out at the end. And at the end, I got the job. And then they were like, oh, fill out the paperwork for HR. And I was like, how? Like, I told you I can't. And they were like, oh, you want to do it as a volunteer? And I was like, well, I had to like mentor like 10 people. And I was like, no, which then shows the lack of training of staff, right? And I think we can create opportunities like the ambassador program and internships within the centers, but if that's because those are intentional places where they know how to navigate those systems of hiring undocumented people as contractors, right? But if the other departments don't have that training, or the university itself doesn't have like a policy or like a structured way on how to hire students without a work permit, then the programs will never be successful and they will never reach the targeted audience, right? Because then you're going to keep getting citizens trying to do the job that like they're trying to explain to undocumented students like what their lives are like, when you could also be that person. Yeah.
Yeah.
To add to what you were saying, Maria, the CUNY has programs, in my experience too, like a CUNY Culture Corps or a CUNY Career Launch. These are programs that didn't specify, that didn't make the language clear about, okay, who is eligible, who is open to these opportunities. And going back to what you were saying earlier, Dr. Carvajal, I want to emphasize that CUNY has to use its weight. CUNY is a humongous university. It has enormous power within the city to make change, and CUNY has to use that weight to help specifically with more paid opportunities for undocumented students. Why do you have to sign up as a volunteer? They didn't take into account the resources that you may have, and undocumented students historically come from low income backgrounds. And so what are you telling these youth that, oh, if you don't have the finances available to make this temporary investment to like stand out as a candidate, then you won't be able to get more jobs in the future? You're already disparaging a population that struggles with having access to a lot of resources. And so I think something that CUNY can do is use the campus-wide programs such as Career Launch or Culture Corps. And maybe undocumented students perhaps may not be eligible for the programs themselves, but let's use that structure to help all of the campuses figure out ways to assist their students with experiential learning opportunities, so that the bulk of the work doesn't fall on the students, the bulk of the work doesn't fall on like the department heads, for example.
Mm-hmm. And I'll add something to that, and this is from the perspective of a new Dream.us scholar, and a new scholar. It's really hard. Every process to speak to somebody is really hard. Cynthia was the first person I ever spoke to on the phone, and I cried on the phone because it's been so many years for me to get in contact with someone that's really gonna give me help. And it's difficult. I think CUNY can do better with that. Like, just for you to be able to reach to someone that gives you the right information is extremely difficult. And then it falls a lot with what Maria said with like the narrative that DACA recipients are really young. I'm 33 years old. And I will sometimes go and try to apply for something and it says 18 to 25. And I'm like, I'm still a DACA recipient, you know? And it's really hard to like see that, because that's when you understand that there's a bad narrative about DACA recipients when it comes to age, gender, I mean, not gender, like race. Like, I am from Dominican Republic, and a lot of people know, like, I started volunteering because I was like, more Dominicans need to voice out that they are DACA recipients. And it comes to with the age too. Like, all the time I'm saying, I'm 33, I'm a DACA recipient, and I'm a mom of 3, and I'm going to school, because I want to break that narrative that not just young people. I didn't get a degree right away, and I think CUNY can help change that narrative when it comes to like those things. Because there's a lot of students like me with DACA that are 33, 34, 35, but not a lot of people know that, because when you walk in or you see any post, there's like 18 to 25, or it's just young people in the images and the visuals. Like, it's not just young people studying. Like there's a lot of us out here, and I think that's something that can be really helpful.
Yes, so I'm hearing a lot about kind of the support related to training, highlighting different experiences, and what is the role of CUNY in all of this. Before we jump into audience questions, I want to give an opportunity to kind of delve a little bit deeper into that. The University of California system, so undocumented students, faculty, and staff there have organized and launched a campaign called Opportunity for All, which, as folks may know, is essentially an effort to highlight that undocumented students can be hired within the university system. And so, Alan, I wondered if you could speak a little bit about the legal foundation of that and the importance and impact of having a system like the University of California system take this effort.
Yeah, so what's going on in California is that a group of law professors from around the country have written to the governing body of the University of California and asked them to hire undocumented students who do not have employment authorization. And their legal thesis is that the 1986 Immigration Reform Act, which created this law that says you can be penalized for hiring a person who's undocumented, did not specifically mention the state. So it's a very technical argument, and these legal scholars say, well, if the state was particularly mentioned, that gives the University of California, as a state institution, which it is, to hire undocumented students. The university has responded by saying that it is studying the issue, studying the legal brief that was provided, and we'll have to see what happens. You know, to really test it, I think that the university would have to hire somebody and then see if the federal government brings charges against them for having done so. So I think we're a bit of ways to know what they're going to do, and what the outcome of that is going to be. But it's no question that it was mentioned earlier that universities, have as you mentioned, have a very influential role to play in American society, and so we'll see what happens with that.
Okay.
I feel like sometimes the university or just places use like laws as an excuse to not do anything. Like their hands are tied, they can't do anything. It's like a federal thing. But in New York, now we have like the New York Dream Act, and that was something that there's programs within CUNY, right, like ASAP or like things that give you money from the state that undocumented students were not eligible for, and now they are because of the New York Dream Act, right? So there are things that can be done within the state with the state money. Even within the schools, they have private funding, not even if it's not coming from the state, but like we now access the state money. So hiring can be done because the money is there, either from the state or from private funding. Every college, every campus does like fundraising all the time, right? And they have like a lot of money that should be given out to the students and not just kept in their bank accounts. So it can be done if they really wanted to, right? Because just making a little post about like, oh, we stand with immigrants, or like, especially today, right? Today is like the I am an immigrant thing, or like I stand with immigrants. Their posts are useless when they're not doing anything in their campus to actually support students, right? So like John Jay in Brooklyn, they have their Immigrant Student Success Center. But what about the other ones that have like just their immigrant liaison? But that person is also in charge of doing 15 other things in that job, right? So then the immigrant students on their campus is not going to be a priority. So yeah.
Yes, I'm hearing there's still a lot of work to be done. But from everything that folks have mentioned, from even understanding the experience to implementing it to pushing on the experience and the legislation the way California is doing. Would anyone from the audience like to add? Jesus, do you have a question?
I just want to second what Maria was saying in terms of the obstacles that we still have as a university. And a simple one is the scholarship applications, right? They're still asking for FAFSA to be used, for example, right? And other things along the way in the journey, the application for admissions, right? There's maybe asking for questions in terms of what, they're questions that shouldn't be there, that should be just used for the students to be known that they're accepted into the college, they could be welcome to the university, and simple messages can transform the experience at the colleges.
Thank you.
Is there anything that could be done to look at those processes and to look at the whole existence of the undocumented students in CUNY to say maybe we can have small victories here and there?
That is an excellent question. I'm wondering, Alan, if you might know the answer to that.
I'm just a lawyer, but Of course, there's always more that we can do. I mean, you know, I think that what's important about what we're doing here today is try and look at CUNY. I mean, you know, to me, having, you know, been involved in a lot of universities around the country, I would say that there's no university in the nation that does more and has done more for its immigrant students. That said, you know, there's a lot of things that need to be corrected and improved upon, and a lot of these things, you know, came up today. So I think that, you know, the way this is going to be improved, the situation is going to be improved, is by the continuing dialogue that we're having, and you know, trying to see where are there glitches, as Jesus from Brooklyn College pointed out, where are there problems in the system that we can improve. How can we ensure that more financial aid is given? You were talking about private funds, no question about it, that private funds can be used for financial aid for undocumented students. So these are the things that we need to look at, and I think, like I said, I think this kind of dialogue and discussion is going to advance that.
Yeah, I know we have maybe like a minute and a half left. Eva, I'd love to kind of have you close out the conversation. I know dialogue is important, but we also need action, right? And we need next steps and something that's being implemented. As we prepare for more DACA decisions to come through, not sure how many years of that, what is it that you believe like universities can start doing, or even like just institutions can start doing to support students?
I think one thing with DACA, and DACA is like in the edge of dying, and one thing that CUNY can do and is just provide funding for renewals. I think that's one big thing. There's a lot of people right now that they might not be able to apply or renew and lose their like the next 2 years because they don't have those fundings. I think CUNY can provide this for immigrants. The money is there. And as a community and organizing, we need to go out there and show up. Like, we have each other. So there's many organizations providing this resources for you to take action and go out there and demand what we deserve. I think we shouldn't shut down and shut up now. Is the time to like scream and go out there and demand. And I believe CUNY can help and bring the community together. There's a lot of us in so many different colleges. Imagine if every single college gets together and we all go out there and voice out like what we deserve. That would be big. And I feel like CUNY can do that. Like, we can hold a week of action of CUNY and all immigrants can come together. And I think that's a start. And I believe it's possible. It's something that can be done.
Thank you, Eva.
Thank you.
So thank you. As we're closing off this portion of the conversation, I want to give thanks again to the panelists for this necessary discussion. Next, we're going to have some CUNY leadership to talk about the available support programs for undocumented students. Welcome back. I'm Cynthia Carvajal. In the second part of our program, we answer the question, what is our responsibility to the undocumented and immigrant community? What are the current resources, and are they enough to help our community? With us are the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, Denise Maybank, John Jay College of Criminal Justice President, Karol Mason, the Immigrant Student Success Center Specialist, Denise Vivar, and finally, Director of Measurement and Evaluation of the Dream.us, Hyein. Welcome to you all. VC Maybank, I wanted to get the conversation started with you. What is the importance of including and normalizing resources for undocumented students at CUNY?
Thank you, Dr. Carvajal. I appreciate that question because I think it is important for us to recognize we invite people into a university environment. And so once we've done that, we need to act as though we believe they should be there and to make certain that they feel comfortable in being in that space. Undocumented students are often trying to figure out how they stay under the radar. And we need to do the things that are necessary to be certain that they know this is a space in which they can thrive. Not only survive and have to be under the radar, but in fact, come into their own, as all students do. And I think that that becomes the critical piece. And so I don't know that it's so much normalizing, because there is nothing at this point that is so normal, but it is about incorporating and making clear that undocumented students belong at CUNY, that we've invited them in and we want them to know that this is a space and a place for them to thrive.
Yes, thank you. I wonder what you would say then is the role of leadership at CUNY in that.
Okay, so Mahir in his comments earlier, in the earlier panel, talked about the fact that CUNY needs to use its weight. And I believe that. I believe that we have an opportunity because we have a voice that can be heard in so many environments. Policies need attention in order to make the space safe and accessible for undocumented students. And an institution that is definitely the largest urban serving institution in our country has the ability to talk about who our students are and to talk about the ways in which we support them, and to make it clear that there are policy barriers often that need attention. We can't act as though the law does not exist, but we can advocate for the changing in those laws.
Thank you. I'm thinking of like the intentionality of creating safe and welcoming spaces. And I wanted to direct the next question to President Carol Mason. In thinking about your campus having the first Immigrant Student Success Center in the state of New York. So to give a little bit of context for folks in the audience, California has 46, Texas has 3, and New York currently has 2. And so I'm wondering what guided you in the implementation process of creating this center at your campus?
And so I have to make sure everybody knows that you were the first director of our Immigrant Student Success Center, and we were lucky enough to lure you to New York City. So the impetus for this was, you mentioned in the earlier panel that in 2017, the then president made it clear that he was not welcoming of DACA students. And thankfully, the students trusted me. I was a new president at the time. I'd only been there a month. And fortunately, they trusted me into their space to have a conversation. And I made a promise to them. I said, I need you to focus on being students and let me worry about the rest. And after that conversation, I started thinking about how do I create the safe space that Dr. Maybank talked about. And so we came up with the idea of creating the Immigrant Student Success Center and started talking to people about funding it, because what we did is worked out a budget of what we needed and what we wanted this center to do. And what we knew we needed first was somebody to run it, to lead it, not to have all the answers, but to be able to understand the experience, to have the background to run it, and be able to find the resources and create a network of resources. And many of them already existed at CUNY through Citizenship Now and the work that Alan was doing, but to tie it together. So we came up with a plan, a budget, raised money against it, and then when I knew that I had enough, I knew I could get the hiring out and go out and advertise the position, and we were lucky enough to find you.
Thank you. I hear kind of a lot of points being made about the fundraising effort for it and making sure that there were enough funds to not only hire someone, but to open the center, to have some programmatic funds. As other campuses, other presidents are thinking about opening similar centers, what is some advice that you would provide as it relates to the funding in particular, and even just the implementation of it in general?
So I think the first thing to do is talk about it. I remember, as you will as well, when I was inducted into the Ellis Island Honor Society, and I was one of the folks asked to give remarks. And I made my remarks all about the Immigrant Student Success Center and our undocumented students. And they said, that's the first time anybody's talked about undocumented students in the context of immigration. And it was eye-opening to me that it was the first time. But as a result of that, people started talking about it and coming up to us and asking how they can invest in our students. So I think the first thing to do is talk about it, bring our students into the light, and let people see them, hear them, talk to them, and understand their experiences. And then I think the money will follow, but you just have to learn to ask for it.
Yeah.
And my secret is, if somebody says no, it just means not no at that moment or to that particular question. But I'm relentless, and with this kind of work, you've got to be relentless, because I believe in what we're trying to do. And the fact that you're now in this position, and we have Denise Vivar running the center, shows that with intentionality, you can really build this work.
Yes, I think the intentionality and the relentlessness of it is key for supporting this population, especially being in the positions that we are in creating these advocacy efforts. I know that we're so fortunate to have Denise Vivar here, who is the current specialist of the Immigrant Student Success Center at John Jay, who has also been relentless in supporting and advocating for our students there. Denise, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions of what does a successful center look like when it's being implemented at CUNY?
Yes, thank you, Cynthia. I think that was a very heavy question, and I say this, right, because I think when working with undocumented students, there's a lot of work to be done, and I think I appreciate when mentioning the word intentional, right? So I think the main, when I think about success, and I heard this from a student yesterday, that it was just having a center, right? like that there's a space that it actually exists within their college that it's able to provide these resources. I think the simple answer is a safe space for students, regardless of immigration status, to be able to trust and have someone that they can go. I think I appreciated the panelists earlier mentioning, like, Eva specifically was mentioning that just having someone that can help you, right? That you go to them and they will have an answer. And even if there's no answer, they will figure it out together, where they don't feel like outsiders or like a burden, or that they are asking something that they shouldn't be asking. So I think that's extremely important. And then with that, I think a successful center, what it also does, it creates an opportunity for additional support systems. So I think the main component is having funding available. It's super vital for the center. Even here, as I'm managing John Jay and the students, I'm always happy to be like, we can have an event, we can do this, right? That involves a lot of funding. I think that's one. But I think too, the panelists were also mentioning a lot of postgraduate support, right? As the center goes into its 4th year and it's developing, it gives the opportunity to develop new initiatives that support undocumented students. Mm-hmm. So thinking about when the center started to where it is now, developing fellowships, right? Finding private funding, making sure that the funding is there to be able to create opportunities to fund opportunities for undocumented students. Because yes, many times they get left out. There's so many programs and opportunities, and many times when they're like applying, it's asking for a social security number, a work authorization, or the instructions are not clear. So many times students are forced to disclose their status because they get invited to an interview and then they get denied, right? So I think finding and having a place that can create that, it's super important. I also think it also goes beyond that, because now that the center exists, and now we need to identify allies within the campus, because students are part of an ecosystem in the college where it's not just the Immigrant Student Success Centers or the centers, but the responsibility of the center is to now build allyship with other departments to make sure that when students are asking questions about career, asking questions about SEEK, asking questions about financial aid, that those departments also know how to support this population, where students don't feel like they can only go to the center. But I think it's also, it branches off more into now hoping and working towards creating a more inclusive environment in the college overall.
I'm hearing a lot of overlap and I mean, you called it into the space too of what the previous panelists were saying and these resources that you've been cultivating at John Jay and expanding upon at John Jay. I'm wondering too, as I'm thinking about the missing opportunities for students and the narratives that aren't included when spaces create, or when institutions create welcoming spaces, centers, or even initiatives for immigrant students. So I'm wondering, what are some maybe key facts that campus presidents, campus student-facing individuals should keep in mind when engaging and supporting this population?
Yes, the first one, I was centering students. I think that is like the most important one. I think in this position, when I was thinking about coming into this position, it was like like a day before all the campuses closed. So there was a change in like leadership since Cynthia was the previous manager and she had started a lot of the initiatives. And then kind of switching that leadership and then going into a pandemic, right? It took a lot of listening and it took a lot of centering the needs of the students. It wasn't what I wanted to do of the center. It wasn't what I had planned, right? Because all of that was erased. So I think it took a lot of listening to the students, centering the students, meeting with them, making sure I was intentional about reaching out, that I was intentional about making sure that I knew what they needed, right? And hearing from them. And I think that is super key. I think as other campuses also branch out, thinking about financial support, I think that is super important. Like it has to be very intentional to the point where these opportunities cannot exist or they cannot be built if there's no one looking for those grants, no one like thinking about where the money they're gonna get, right? So I think that's also very key. Another thing that I'm just thinking about is also space and just thinking about what makes us successful centered. I don't know if it's successful, but I think one thing that I appreciate in my job and now that we go back in person is the community building. So making sure that it's not just resources. I think that sometimes can be very broad and vague, but it's not just about a website. It's not just about the link. It's not about, here it is, like look it up yourself, because I have many conversations where with students, I need to have 3 meetings, right? When students come to me and they're like, I'm undocumented, like I'm trying to go into computer science. I don't have a work authorization. There's a lot of things to break away from that and kind of talk to students about, which it requires multiple meetings, right? One meeting, let's talk about what it means to not have a work authorization. Let's go a little bit into like what is the legal technicalities about that. Then let's talk about what are your opportunities, and then let's do some research. Then the student starts building that. And I think that's super important, and which is why it requires a center and a full-time person and someone to be present there. I know I was out on Monday and I had students coming like, where were you? Like, why are you not here? And so all these things, so students just kind of feeling like they're having a space. When I was reading the question of a successful center, I was like, I'm not sure if I'm the right person to answer that, or if they should be asking the students, right? So I was asking a couple of students, and I know some of the students were kind of mentioning, I think just the fact that we're here and that it's open, that we can just come and not feel judged, and come and like, even if you don't have an answer, like we'll figure it out. Yeah. So I think that's super important as other spaces continue to build spaces like this one.
Mm-hmm. And so everything you've detailed out, and even as, again, like the panelists shared, the work is tremendous. And like you have been doing an incredible job at the center in uplifting that. Jesus as well, who's joining us here from Brooklyn College. But one thing that I know that we all kind of highlight, and I especially do when I provide any kind of trainings, is to not do this alone, right? To partner with other spaces to make sure that we're all supporting and addressing these issues with students. And so with that in mind, I wanted to then kind of direct the next question to Hyein, who's coming here from the Dream.us. CUNY has a deep relationship with the Dream.us. And so Hyein, I wanted to provide an opportunity for you to talk a little bit more about the Dream.us, the scholarship, and the resources that they're providing for undocumented students.
Yes, thank you, Cynthia. Thank you for inviting us. We're so excited to be part of this conversation. So the Dream.us does have a long history with CUNY. We are first and foremost a scholarship program for undocumented students, both with and without DACA or TPS. We had started in the spring of 2014, and CUNY has been with us right there since the beginning. We initially partnered with a couple of our community colleges, BMCC, Kingsborough, and then since then, the year after, we've now worked with the entire system since 2015, and that's been really important to us, and CUNY is one of our largest partners. So historically, we've awarded just under 9,000 scholarships, which is really, really crazy to think about across the country. We work with 80 plus partner colleges. We're in 21 states and Washington, D.C., but the City University of New York is so important to us because we have awarded now just under 1,700 scholarships in the CUNY system. But I know you always emphasize, and leadership at CUNY always emphasizes, that we're the tip of the iceberg, that CUNY is a metaphor for what's going on across the country. We know that we're awarding a lot of scholarships, but it's really a small portion of the 100,000 undocumented high school students who are graduating every year. And I really appreciate this conversation of pushing us all to think beyond DACA. So one thing that we've really learned is that we are serving a new population of students that no longer have DACA and also would never have been eligible for DACA in the first place. So I do want to emphasize that our scholarship is separate from the DREAM Act. We want this to be very clear because people confuse us, the Dream.us, as a scholarship program. We provide private funds for our students to attend college. We cover both the cost of mandatory tuition and fees, as well as providing a stipend. So every semester a student is enrolled, they will receive $750 in cash for books and supplies, which is very different from state aid. And so we want to emphasize that all of our undocumented students should apply for both the DREAM Act as well as the Dream.us, and that way they can get their full cost of tuition and fees covered for at the City University of New York because the cost of tuition fees is so affordable.
Yes, I wonder, as you're talking about having this conversation beyond DACA, we've been highlighting it in different ways here. What has data from the Dream.us kind of highlighted as we continue this conversation about thinking of students beyond DACA?
Yeah, so we're in a very unique position where we get to collect a breadth of data from across the country. I know since the 2016 presidential election, data collection, particularly around immigrant students in the space of higher ed, has become a very controversial conversation. But for us, it's been so important to collect that data narrative so we can better understand what's happening and better provide supports for our students. So this year, we welcomed 1,200 new scholarship recipients across the country. About 200 of those students are now starting at CUNY. 80% of those do not have DACA or TPS. And if we look at CUNY students alone, that percentage increases to 85%. And I really want to emphasize how special CUNY is because of its diversity. So the majority of our scholarship recipients nationwide identify as Latinx. So it's about 86%. If we look at CUNY students alone, that percentage drops to 69%. So that tells you that about a third of CUNY scholarship recipients are now more coming from countries in Africa, in Asia. It's a very diverse narrative that's very different from what we hear, for example, in the state of California or Texas. The other thing I'll emphasize is that, we've been talking a lot about what the career needs are for undocumented students. But we want to emphasize that the financial need to complete college is still really, really important and should still be at the center of the conversation. So every year we're very fortunate to hear from our students. They're very generous. I know Ava is a new scholarship recipient. I see an alumni here in attendance, and they give us some of their time to share what's been going on in their past year. And we hear directly from students. This past year, the number one need students said that they needed for college success and for their personal well-being is more financial aid. So more financial aid to cover the cost of textbooks, supplies, transportation, costs that are incurred for academic success, as well as emergency grants. So knowing that our students are part of a larger context of supporting their families, they're the translators. If they have driver's licenses, they're the ones driving their family members around. Many of our students don't have health insurance or have family members who are not eligible for health insurance. So that financial need just to get to college completion is very important, in addition to all the conversations we've been having about career development opportunities.
Thank you, Hyein. I know that the Dream.us has had, in this relationship that it's been developing, you've been really helpful at guiding us in supporting our students and in even just providing the funds and extending those funds for our students. I want to give some time for the audience to provide some questions. I know we have some online questions. So one question that came up is, in terms of representation in media and TV, what do you think is missing or necessary to show or represent Dreamer or undocumented people? Would anyone like to take on that question?
I can start. I think this is a huge one in the media and also like in a lot of different spaces. And I'll talk a little bit more also about the work that we have done at the center. But I think sometimes the conversation around like undocumented folks, it focuses so much on like Latinx, or because we share a border, or Mexican immigrants. And I think it's really centered on that many times we forget about Black undocumented immigrants. And I think that's really important to mention, especially when you were mentioning the data, right, that we're seeing an increased population. And that also matters because they're also impacted in other different systematic ways, which then helps us, to understand that, then helps us better support that population. And I think that sometimes it's so missing out that it's a population that folks don't even think about. I know at the center in our undocumented ally trainings, we added, or the presentation, it's focused on Black immigrants or Black undocumented immigrants, because we want to make sure that students know the population that is sometimes impacted the most as well.
Thank you.
Can I do a Denise tag team?
Yes.
Because I really do want to emphasize that point, the face of undocumented students, and to make sure that people understand it touches communities across our country. Because just as Hyein was saying, once we have an undocumented student and that person is responsible for doing things for the family, doing things for siblings and so forth, it has greater impact for the family, for the community, for the country. And so being able to make certain that undocumented students have that same mobility, that same opportunity to heighten what's possible for their family becomes critical. So it is not one person whose life is changed or touched because they get to go to college, and to expand those opportunities, the family, the community, the country benefits.
Yes, yeah, our community members are in community with citizens, our neighbors, our classmates, our colleagues. I wanted to give another chance for another question to be asked. Does anyone from the audience have any questions they want to ask? Oh, we have an audience member.
This is for the Vice Chancellor.
So towards the beginning, with all due respect, I wanted to push back on your narrative that undocumented students are afraid and that they're trying to like be under the radar. I think undocumented students are tired of having to be in the shadows, right? And what they're asking for is, they're not really asking for it, now they're demanding that the resources are visible and not just like a website, like on the website is like randomly there, right? It should be like on the main page. It should be like at orientation, when people go to orientation, the pamphlets that people go on to like the high schools and they give resources about like the campus. We were looking at the one that we have at our office today for Baruch, and it said like, oh, there's how many languages are spoken in the school and how many people from different countries. So if you have those numbers, right, then why are you not like supporting them in like better? And also, as you mentioned, CUNY needs to make sure that it's a welcoming space for immigrant students, undocumented students, CPS holders. What is it actually doing to do that? Other than hiring Cynthia or Denise and creating the centers and Jesus, right? Like, what are actual steps that are happening, especially when we think of beyond DACA, right? Because we know that it's, like somebody else mentioned in the last panel, it's on its last leg, and we know that it might not survive. So what are actual next steps that you are preparing already now?
And your name is?
Maria.
Maria, thank you for your comment and your question. I wanted to say that I was not looking to relegate anyone to any particular behaviors or expectations in any way. It was an observation, okay? And so thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that there are populations of students who are very willing to be advocates, to be out front, and to make certain that people are aware. I also want to be able to make sure, though, that those who may not have that tenacity in them get attention as well, just as you're asking. So when you ask about what we're trying to do, the benefit of creating centers and creating opportunity for positions like that which Cynthia holds is to challenge us, to make certain that we know what it is that's going to make a difference. And we hear that from our students. We have to be willing to listen. We have to be certain that we're able to hear what it is that individuals need and not decide that we know. That's a part of what happens all too often in higher education. We know how to fix this. We know what to do about that, when what we need to do is step back, sit down, and listen, so that we hear the heart, hear the reality, and understand what it is that's going to make the difference. Because if I try to craft it, I'm doing it from my lens. And it's not necessarily what the person needs. It may be just as we started, my observation, but that doesn't mean that that's what's necessary. So we have to have the opportunity for people with lived experience, like Dr. Carvajal, to help challenge us in thinking through, what do we need to do? When I think about what Denise does at John Jay and what happens at Brooklyn College through those centers, it opens the door for us to be able to hear. And just keep bringing it. Don't stop. Make sure that we know, so that we're not fixing the wrong problem.
I just wanted to add a couple of things to your question about just some tangible things that CUNY-wide is doing. Again, it's not just these conversations and not just talking. They walk the walk as well. And so during COVID, when the federal money went out that was not, and undocumented students in the first round were not eligible, two things happened. One, CUNY went out there and advocated, so when the second tranche came, that was changed. The other thing CUNY did was, while that restriction was in place, raised money from private philanthropy so that our students who are undocumented, who did not have the ability to access those funds, were not left out. So we see you, and you are always front of mind. And the other thing that we're doing is, as we, I really appreciate your comment about that the scholarships and getting them through college is important. But now that we're maturing in our work, we realize getting the degree and then what happens. I remember one of our programs that we have, the Rosanna Rosado Fellows, and the students were graduating, and so many of them, when the donor asked, what do you do next? And they're like, well, because we're not documented, our opportunities are limited. Well, then we went out and started raising money to figure out how to create job opportunities, and that's happening CUNY-wide. That's not just at John Jay. We are thinking about what's next, and to Dr. Maybank's point, we need you to tell us, because once we heard it, then we began to figure out how do we do it. So thank you for the question, and thank you, as she said, for continuing to challenge us to do more and to be better, because we will rise to that challenge, because you're important.
Thank you. Thank you, VC Maybank and Carol, for answering that question. We have one more question from online. I think it's a large question. I wonder what are folks' thoughts on it. Specifically, why is there not more funding available to undocumented students and dreamers?
Well, since I'm the lawyer here, I'll start with it. I'm not Alan, just to be clear. I'm not, the only reason I know some of the answers is because I've hit the roadblocks. There are restrictions on the use of federal money to do certain things for people who are undocumented. So that's why you hear us emphasizing raising private money, because there are no restrictions on that. And I loved what Alan said in the first panel about what California is being strategic about doing, and New York has already done it. So New York has said, okay, we're going to provide New York State dollars to support undocumented students in New York State. And so I think that's why it's important, why we have to trace the dollars, unfortunately, is because the source of the money impacts what we can do with it. But there are lots of people out there, as evidenced by the Dream.us folks, who want to support our undocumented students and their success. And to the earlier panel about who is in this population we're trying to support, it's not just the students, but their families as well.
Yes, thank you. I did see that there was another question from online asking about where can they get resources for Dream.us. If you check out the website, the Dream.us, you're able to find a little bit more information and perhaps get someone from the Dream.us to provide your high school with specifically more information related to the scholarship. I want to give thanks to one last time to the panelists, and thank you for watching the I Am a Dreamer special Beyond DACA. You can watch the TV series at tv.cuny.edu or on our YouTube page, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. For more information on finding resources or support in navigating this journey as an undocumented student, please visit our CUNY Office of Immigrant Student Success, which is cuny.edu/immigrant. I'm Cynthia Carvajal.